To me, Christian Miller is the biggest problem on defense. He's tough inside, plugs, and has enough bull in him to collapse the pocket. That was a scouting report, off the record comment from an SEC coach or a college football coach about Christian Miller's Georgia Bulldogs. They're going to have to get ready on the defensive line, something I talked about and wrote about, I should say, during a premium story over on Dawg Post earlier this week. And I think when you start thinking about where Georgia's got to be better, the defensive line is a very important part of that. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Christian Miller is not a guy I talked about. I was talking about who has to, quote, get there. And that's the hard part for Georgia. I mean, who's going to step up on the defensive line? It can't, everything in 2025 can't be predicated on, oh my gosh, I hope Elijah Griffin is really, really, really good. No. I mean, yeah, sure, but you can't, it's got to be a lot of guys. And in the current climate that we have in college football, where it's harder to develop, it's harder to get depth. It's not necessarily harder to develop. Perhaps it's harder to develop because you don't have as many guys, yada, yada, yada. You're going to have some moments where older players are just going to have to perform at a higher level. You're going to have moments where younger guys are going to have to be a little better than they should be at that point in their development. It makes it trickier than it was and very specifically in 2021. To some degree, you could say that about 2020. I mean, the 2020 season that I remember the most part about was the rotation at quarterback. I mean, you had a season of 10 games with 3 quarterbacks starting. So that was the easy part to remember about that season. But other than that, Arkansas, they scored 10 points. Auburn, 6. Tennessee's offense scored 14 points, I think it was. Alabama, an elite offense, 41 points. Not the first half. They had a hard time. Kentucky had 14. Again, the Gators, 44, a very good offense. Mississippi State, 24. Carolina, 16. Mizzou, a pretty good offense, to be honest with you, at 14. And then Cincinnati at 21, a good offense that season, good team. So that season in 2020, only 2 teams, their offense scored over 3 touchdowns against Georgia in a game. It wasn't a lot. And they had a bunch of depth. They had, Aziz. They had Jordan. They had Jalen Carter. They had all these guys who they could, plug and play. That's the wrong term. But they had the defensive line completely ready to roll. This past season, the defensive line, again, Alabama scored a bunch of points, 41. Mississippi State scored 31. You had, Ole Miss at 28. You had Tech at 42. Way too many points to really expect to win those games. They won 2 of those games I was talking about, but way too many points given up in those games. It needed to be more like Clemson, Tennessee Tech, and Kentucky, where combined, the other team scored 18 points in 3 games. Or Auburn, where they're scoring 13 points. Texas is scoring 15. And one of those touchdowns against Texas was with the ball absolutely at the 10-yard line. They were starting. It's hard to, the performance against Notre Dame defensively was pretty good. That was not a great Notre Dame offense, but that was a good performance for the Georgia defense. But when you give up a touchdown when you're not on the field, and when you give up a touchdown, when they got to drive the ball, I think 12 yards or whatever it is, I mean, you get to 14 points real quick. So, that game certainly could have been a Georgia 17-14 win or something like that. Or, I don't know. But, there was too much of what happened in the Notre Dame game happened during the season at Georgia for that to be a surprise. I don't think it was a surprise. The Georgia partisans were really, there was a lot of they're not going to lose to Notre Dame and all that stuff. I try to say to people, hey, we don't know enough about this team at this moment to really predict that they'll win. I didn't expect them to win it. I picked against them. I said, and a lot of y'all in the comments section have much to say about me saying they're not winning the national championship with Carson Beck not as a quarterback. So listen to me what I'm talking about right now. This team is better than people realize from my perspective. I'm not guaranteeing a conference championship or a national championship. But one thing, when you start talking about, can Christian Miller be what this insiders talking about if he can, or if he will be that, then you can set the rest of your defensive line. If you've got your tackles with Monroe Freeling and Ernest Green, if those are your tackles, you can set, because you got Bobo at center. You can set your guards. There's no telling what you can do a lot of things at guard. You got Calhoun. You could go with Gaston. There's a lot there, and there's guys I'm not even naming, not on purpose. But back to the defensive line. This is, I don't know if it's the critical moment. Georgia's not been bad on defense since Kirby took over. Even in 2016, they were a pretty good defense. But they've gone backwards versus where they were when they were absolutely elite. Can they inch forward some and play the way they did, against Clemson, against Kentucky, against, to some degree against Notre Dame when they were on the field? Can they do that? I think they can. Here's what Kirby had to say about a few of his defensive linemen. He said, "I've been really impressed with Nambi, Jordan, and Nas. They're working their tail off to get better. They're buying in. They've seen what Trey Scott has done with guys in their second year, with guys in their third year, and then the guys in their fourth year really do well here. They're buying into that." Of course, he was talking, and that's nevertheless JJA and Griffin. So this is a group that has the structure to be efficient and good. The challenge will be doing it when the Redcoats are playing. That's going to be the challenge. This is the part that I think is, why people, as we get closer to the season, people become more optimistic, and that's just sort of human nature, I guess. But here's the moment that Kirby's talking about to me. This is the part to pay attention to. He says generally speaking, we're probably not as good on the line of scrimmage as we have been in the last 3 to 4 years. We've got time to get there, and we've got to get there. I think that's the part of this that's so important. And when he says we've got time to get there, this is not when he was playing in 1995 and your whole season could end week 1 against Tennessee or week 2 against South Carolina. This is not that you don't win the conference and your season's over. These guys, at the beginning of the year, okay, you get to October 4th, Georgia should not have more than a loss, and they probably should be undefeated. Let's just see. Then you're going to Auburn and playing Ole Miss. That back-to-back is going to be challenging because you're going to Auburn, first of all. And Mississippi is not what they were a season ago, we don't think. But we'll just see. But you have time in that first 7 games of the season before you get to Jacksonville. You can develop your team along the way. You can play guys that that can give you 10 snaps on the defensive line. That's great. I've not even mentioned Xavier McLeod. I think he had like 10 or 12 snaps against Kentucky last year. If he didn't have those 10 or 12 snaps against Kentucky, it might have been a different ball game for Georgia in the fourth quarter. Now, see, people just want these sexy beatings, and I'm all for blowouts. Again, I am team early kickoff and team blowout. I want both those things. I want to be out of Sanford Stadium at like 5:30 on the Saturday so I can start getting to work and so that I can go to bed at like 2 or 3 and not 5 or 6 in the morning. So that's I'm team blowout, all right? But if that's the easy part. When you're killing everybody, it's the struggle. And during that time that you're struggling, you are also developing your team and the muscle memory that goes along with pushing forward in a way that matters. They're going to need guys like McLeod to be solid players for them. They don't have to be unbelievable, but they have to be good players. And there's too many like Jonah Ajayi. One person told me earlier this year that he was very disruptive during spring, and a couple other people back that up without me really asking about it, saying that they were calling his name a lot. We talk about this over on Dawg Post a ton. We've got a bunch of specials about subscriptions that y'all can take advantage of. A lot of y'all already have. But make sure you're checking us out. But I think this is the biggest, the lines of scrimmage, for all the discussion of Gunner, for all of the talk about the new wide receivers, for this, that, and the other, and all the sexy parts, man. You got to have the foundational stuff in order to score these easy pop touchdowns, the home run hitters. You can't do that if you're not blocking effectively. Go watch the run that James Cook had against Alabama in the national championship game in 21. Go look at that run. That wasn't a sexy run. That just was the offensive line getting the job done, and it eventually smashing through, and James Cook was not gone, but close to being gone, and then Zamir scores a touchdown not that much longer after that play. That's football. I mean, you're not just going to throw fades, you know what I mean? You got to go do the hard work. And let's see where this defensive line goes, because this is an important part of what Georgia is. It's always challenging having to score 30 points to win a football game in the Southeastern Conference. It's hard to do that. Georgia did it a couple times last season. They got away with it. But you're not going to do that a lot and win. They almost didn't do that against Georgia Tech. So can you keep people under 20 points? That doesn't even guarantee that you win, but can you keep them under 20 points? Well, the biggest part of that is how the defensive line plays. The biggest part of that is development and getting these guys right before they go to Knoxville. Thanks for watching.